huge winner, and for a couple of basic reasons. One is, when we started the process of looking at all of the entries, we decided up front that anybody we put on the short list had to be worthy of consideration for Grand Prix. So that was critical for us. So basically, we wanted to be able to discuss all of our entries, all of our shortlisted entries for the Grand Prix. So we knew going in that everything, had a worthiness to it. What made this stand out were a couple of things. One is the clarity of the presentation of the information. So one of the problems that we saw, not in the shortlist per se, but in many of the other entries, was this: for the first time ever in the history of social marketing, we did X. Never before done in digital channels. Or my favorite, we decided the only way to solve this problem was through non-traditional means. And then they went on to tell you about the television that they created. So we discounted all that stuff. One of the beauties of this, and the truth is that even some of the shortlisted guys started that way, even though they got into real results at the end. But quite frankly, it's irrelevant to me if your campaign is in Melbourne and you got 20 million views in Bulgaria. Like, who cares, right? Don't tell me that. It's not important to me. Just tell me what you did and why. So they presented their information brilliantly and beautifully. Secondly, they had an insight that led to a strategy, that led to an execution, that led to a distribution or a deployment or media, whatever you want to call it, makes no difference, across multiple channels, paid and non. It was tied very specifically to business goals, to times of day of business goals, and during that period they did zero discounting and no other promotion.
We looked at that and said that is just a cracking idea, delivering some amazing results that is scalable. So just because it's sitting on a client that happens to be in Melbourne, Australia, doesn't mean that idea couldn't be sitting in any transport organisation around the world. And I think more importantly, it got people thinking certainly in the jury and what it was awarded, to say that is an insight that everyone just said, yes. It's so obvious, why didn't I think of that as an insight? But with a nice tongue-in-cheek, funny approach to that insight. And I think what they did was they took the insight right into creating a product in a fairly low engagement category, really branding something that hasn't been branded before, and the results flowed off the back of that.
I think at the end of the day, what won it for the Grand Prix was just how tight the case was. And I think people have to understand, the questions yesterday at the press conference, we already knew were going to come at us. One, Dumb Ways to Die, and Dove, two of the most highly awarded ones. And as David took the question, and I was going to say, well, if it had to just do with how many awards you win, you didn't have to judge, So, but anyway, back to the point. I think the creative effect is still feeling its way a bit, and we wanted to make a bit of a statement with this one, that it is not necessarily about scale. It's not about global versus local. It's how well reasoned the case was, how well told the case was, and how tight you could actually link and isolate this creative effort and this result. You could sell it to any rail company. You could probably sell it to any airline. It's that universal idea. So I think rather than look at it as local, we looked at it as a universal idea that was executed locally.
I think it had the majority of the judging panel prefer it, and I think partly because of its simplicity. And it is an extendable idea because and it's not just extendable in terms of railway trips. I think the beauty of the campaign, as all of the campaigns that won gold, and certainly were on our shortlist, was that the insight that was captured through a great strategy and then a good creative platform really was what's extendable. So the fact that in many countries children leave home, don't go back, that's really the core idea. How do you get them to come back? Capturing that, making them feel guilty, which they already feel guilty about, and then doing that in a wonderfully fresh and creative way, which they did through their parents working out strategies of how to approach this, I think was the nice part of the campaign.
You know, it was one of those cases where they had incredibly great insight that was actually globally universal. So while it was one brand and one company in a smaller market, and it seems very small, it's something that actually could be scaled globally or done globally, and the results were incredibly strong. I mean, you know, what they were able to do with that campaign and directly tie back to that exact piece of creative and that exact campaign was really impressive. So that's why we felt like they were the ones to win the Grand Prix.
I think it's great to see the fact that it's possible to produce fantastic creativity and fantastic results on a small budget. In fact, you'd almost argue the reverse, that if you have a small budget, you need to have really sharp thinking and be able to put that into a good kind of creative framework in order to be able to get results. So one of the things that you have to recognize about this campaign is they produced, using a $400,000 budget, sales results over a 6-month period. And when you compare that to a lot of campaigns that were in the long list and things, they would say, well, you know, it was during the 2-week period when we were on air, something happened. This did much better than that, and for a much more substantial period of time, so it's really worth more.